Doctor Who, A Rise of the Cybermen, Part 1. The Cybermen were originally created on Mondas when the doctors and scientists of the humans living there experimented with cybernetics to repair injuries. Over time, the doctors, scientists, and cybernetic humans replaced more and more limbs to be more cybernetic, until very little flesh organs remained, most notably the brain. As they did so, emotions were erased and the cybernetic humans, now known as Cybermen, came to believe that emotions made people weaker and that they were stronger without them. The Cybermen also believe that every living thing should be like them and will not stop until they have either converted or deleted all those who are not Cybermen. On a parallel Earth, a disabled and dying businessman known as John Lumic was doing the exact same thing. At some point after the creation of his Cybermen, they escaped into the Ultimate Universe and joined forces with the Cybermen from that universe's Mondas. Eventually, newer breeds of the Cybermen emerged, more deadly and powerful than before, and John Lumic kept himself alive and non-converted long enough to oversee this. But what goes around, comes around. Doctor Who, A Rise of the Cybermen, written and read by Nick Payne, Part 1. So why did these parallel Cybermen and this Lumic guy come to our universe? Daniel Jugsworth asked the Doctor, who was at the controls of his TARDIS, travelling towards the Cybus Industries headquarters in Tokyo, Japan, on Earth. Long story, it involves some void stuff and the Daleks, the Doctor responded. I was a different man back then. Actually, I was a woman, Sharp Eye. Apparently, they survived the Time War, the Daleks that is, but I hadn't fought in the Time War then. That was battle, with a bit of positive and a pinch of me. I've heard about these Cybermen, George Inksworth said, unemotionally. Well, the Mondasian ones anyway. They are not to be underestimated. I thought you'd get on well with them, George, Jugsworth joked. You aren't very emotional yourself. George scoffed and scowled at Jugsworth. The Doctor laughed. Well, don't worry, guys. We'll have a bit of help with these Cybermen. Oh, not more of your other selves, groaned Felicity Mina. No, I mean K9 Mark 10, the Doctor said. Each one of my incarnations owns a different model of a robot dog called K9 that my first incarnation acquired on his travels, and each one the same number as the Doctor they travel with. In this case, the Mark 10 unit. A robot dog? Jugsworth asked. Ludicrous. You haven't seen anything yet, the Doctor said. By the way, Felicity, why did you help Lumic in the first place? George asked. I didn't know, Felicity exclaimed. It was an anonymous client. I didn't know it was Lumic until that text message. A bit like with the Master being an anonymous client, Jugsworth said. Exactly, Felicity said. Well, we're about to arrive, the Doctor said. Worried. Here we go. The TARDIS landed just outside Cyber Industries headquarters in Tokyo. The four of them in K9, now activated, exited the TARDIS. Cybus Industries, Jugsworth said. Joy. Affirmative, K9 Mark 10 said. Oh, that's how it sounds, muttered Jugsworth. Affirmative, the Doctor responded. That's my catchphrase, Master, said K9. No, that's somebody else. I'm the Doctor, the Doctor said, annoyed. Sorry, that was my catchphrase, Doctor Master, K9 said. Felicity laughed. What a dog, she said. Affirmative, Mistress Felicity, K9 responded, taking Felicity off guard. Ah! She cringed as the Doctor, Jugsworth and George laughed. So what's the plan, boss? Jugsworth asked the Doctor. Well, we need to investigate what's going on inside first, the Doctor said, so we can work out a strategy on how to defeat them. Why don't we just let George cut them down and blow up the rest? Felicity asked. Although my sword could cut the Cybermen, they are all still extremely strong and not easily defeated with weapons, apart from strong explosives, George said. Yeah, why don't you just blow them to Kingdom Come? Felicity asked. I'm sorry, do you see any explosions around here? Jugsworth asked. We need to think this through, woman. Don't patronise me, dickhead, Felicity shouted. Language! Some random stranger shouted from a distance. Oh, shut up! Felicity shouted back. Guys, the doctor attempted to intervene. As a great team exercising as this is, we need to stay on track. I suggest we get someone inside to distract Lumic whilst the rest of us investigate. We'll have to stay in touch with each other, of course. There was a pause as the doctor, Jugsworth and George looked towards Felicity. She frowned. Why do I have the feeling you're going to suggest me? Mr. Lumic, there's a Miss Mina to see you, John Lumic's secretary said. Lumic was currently on tour of his factories and headquarters across the world, and was at this point in time visiting the Tokyo headquarters. At the moment, he was in an office making his plans. He groaned when he heard who it was. Send him in, please, Usagi, he said. Upon allowance, Felicity entered Lumic's office. Ah, Miss Mina, Lumic said calmly. What can I do for you today? Was your payment insufficient? The payment was good, thank you, Felicity said, but I want to know why on earth, or rather off it, you hired me to steal gold and jewellery from the space agency. She knew the answer really, but she wanted to hear what Lumic had to say for himself, or rather how he was going to cover his tracks. Well, Miss Mina, Lumic responded, if I'm being completely honest with you, my dear, I wanted that gold out of the way so the space agency could not use it against my Cybermen. The jewellery was a bonus. Felicity was shocked. I'm afraid it's true, my dear, Lumic said. It's shocking, I know, that I, John Lumic, a respectable businessman, is in fact the creator of the Cybermen from a parallel universe and the overseer of a breed of modern Cybermen in this universe. No, I knew that, Felicity said. I was shocked that you flat out admitted it. Lumic laughed, sinisterly. You seem to know about my activities, my dear, he said. Felicity was slightly taken aback by this. Was Lumic onto her? Did he know about the doctor? Did he suspect her of working with one of them? Yes, well, as soon as I got your text, I knew, she said nervously. Are you sure about that? Lumic asked. Felicity shrugged. Of course, she said, calmly and without batting an eyelid. Inside, she was worried. Lumic came closer in his wheelchair. Help! Felicity was thinking to herself. Lumic then pressed a button on the armrest of his wheelchair. A door opened and a steel man came walking out. Shit! Thought Felicity. I'm worse than dead. Meanwhile, the Doctor, Jugsworth, George and K9 had snuck into one of the buildings. They had no idea where to start. George suggested that they should start in the offices run by high-ranking officials in the company. Problem is, man, Jugsworth interrupted, Lumic is the only big shot that works here. Shall we just look around aimlessly for a bit then? The Doctor asked. Sure, Jugsworth said. Fine, George said. Affirmative, K9 said. George scoffed under his breath. Back in Lumic's office, the Cyberman approached Felicity. Yes, John Lumic, the Cyberman asked. Restrain this woman and take her for questioning, Lumic said. The Cyberman obeyed, but Felicity was quick enough to dodge it. You're not turning me into a Cyberman, she exclaimed and ran to the door and opened it, only to find her path blocked by another Cyberman. She closed it. And I am not wearing a cyber bikini, she added, running across the room, avoiding the first Cyberman. The second then opened the door and entered. Felicity took out her gun and pointed it at the second Cyberman, then the first, then at Lumic. I wouldn't recommend it, my dear, Lumic said calmly. They'll treat you less nicely without me being there. Who said I was going to shoot you? Felicity asked, then raised her gun and fired. The bullet cracked the window and caused it to shatter. Felicity then ran across the room and jumped out the window, activating a rope from her waist belt as she swung across to a building on the other side, then down to the ground. Security alert! An alarm sounded. Human female intruder in Section A. Apprehend for questioning. Shit! Felicity exclaimed and ran as fast as she could as security guards and Cybermen began to chase her. Boy, we must really have set the alarms off, Jugsworth said as he, the Doctor, George and K9 snuck into different rooms. But we're being quiet, George said. Even the tin dog. I resent the term tin dog, K9 said quietly. I prefer metal dog or robot dog. Whatever, George muttered. They entered an office where there was lots of blueprints and schematics of cyber designs. I think Lumic's creating a new breed of Cybermen, the Doctor said. Gee, what gave it away? George asked mockingly. The strength of these new Cybermen listed on these documents are showing signs of super speed and super strength, George said, looking at the documents. Not to mention more advanced weaponry, Jugsworth added, useful for killing people. Gee, what gave that away? The Doctor asked mockingly. Okay, that's enough of that, George hissed. Dr. Master, K9 whispered, sense detects Cybermen approaching the room. Suggest we hide. He's right, George said. I can hear them. Then we've got to get out of here, said the Doctor. There aren't any places to hide, except under the table in the middle of the room. They will find us easily. What about the ventilation shaft, boss? Jugsworth asked, looking up. Of course! The Doctor exclaimed, and jumped up onto the table. He sonicked the ventilation shaft hatch open, and it dropped. Jugsworth and George climbed up and into the shaft. "Sorry, boy, but you won't fit in here," the doctor said to K9. "Hide under the table. If you are discovered, you know what to do." "Affirmative, Dr. Master," K9 said. The doctor smiled. "Good boy." Then he climbed into the ventilation shaft, closed the hatch, and sonicked it. He then moved his way through the ventilation shaft. K9 turned to face the door and slid under the table. They were just in time, as at that second the door to the room opened and two Cybermen entered. "Humans detected being in this room," the first one said. "They must be taken for processing." "No humans located," the second responded. The first looked under the table. K9 looked up. "Robot dog located," said the first Cyberman. K9's gun came out from under its nose and fired at the Cyberman's head, blowing it up. It crashed to the floor in front of K9. "Delete," the second Cyberman said. K9 slid out from under the table and fired at the chest of the second Cyberman. "Ah!" it said, then collapsed to the floor. K9 slid past through the door. He decided to go left, further into the building. "There's always a ventilator shaft," the doctor said, climbing through the ventilator shafts. "Where are we heading for?" George asked. "Wherever Jugsworth thinks," the doctor said. "He's in front." "I'm just moving forward, boss," Jugsworth said, then came to a stop. "Hold on, I found something." "What?" the doctor asked. "Some sort of conversion chamber control room," Jugsworth responded. "That's a lot of C's," George said, wittingly. "Anyone down there?" the doctor asked Jugsworth, ignoring George's comment. "Nothing, boss," Jugsworth said. "We could do some spying or sabotage." "Nice," the doctor said, smiling. He got out his sonic screwdriver and passed it up to George, who then passed it up to Jugsworth. Jugsworth then sonicked the hatch and pushed it open. He placed the sonic inside his coat pocket and climbed down to the ground. George and the doctor followed, and Jugsworth returned the sonic screwdriver to the doctor. They appeared to be on a platform overlooking the room, which, as Jugsworth said, appeared to be a control room for a conversion chamber. Suddenly, a door below opened and several Cybermen, led by a cyber leader, walked into the control room. The Cybermen then stood in a line and faced one of the walls. The cyber leader stood at the end of the line, facing his soldiers. Meanwhile, K9 trundled down the corridor towards an exit towards the building. As he reached the outside, he noticed a woman being chased by security guards and Cybermen. "Mistress Felicity?" K9 asked himself, and decided to follow her. Felicity ran to another building and went through a door. Upon entering the building, she attempted to lock the door. She was unsuccessful, so instead ran. She whipped out her gun ready to fight back and hid in a small office. She waited as the security guards and the Cybermen stormed into the building. She gulped and trembled. She wasn't usually timid or scared by nature, but sometimes there were times she was scared of being caught by her enemies, which she was more afraid of than her enemies themselves. "Intruders have been detected. Remain here in case they find this room," the cyber leader said. "They must not be allowed to interfere with the rise of the Cybermen." "So it appears that these Cybermen's plans have yet to be completed," George said quietly. "By the looks of it," the doctor said, "they are talking about the new Cybermen. These are a mix of the current Mondasian and Cybus ones. Looking at the blueprints, the new guys are a big deal," Jugsworth said. "No shit," the doctor responded. "So what do we do?" George asked. "See that little phone device over there that looks like a charger?" the doctor asked. Yes, Jugsworth and George said. "It's not actually a phone," the doctor said, then giggled and smiled. "If we can get our hands on that not phone, I can write down a number that could be transmitted via the not phone and its charger holder thing, which will destroy the Cybermen, or at least the new designs. The older ones, we might need a backup plan for them. We may need a backup plan full stop," Jugsworth commented. "Oh, do you want to volunteer?" the doctor snarkily asked, then laughed. "Oh, that's ridiculous, man," Jugsworth shouted loudly. The Cybermen heard him. "Crap," George whispered under his breath, as Jugsworth continued to rant. "Just because I think we need a backup plan doesn't mean I'm willingly going to risk my life without some sort of reassurance that I'm not going to be converted or deleted." "Alert," the cyber leader said. "Intruders detected on the platform above. Capture for questioning and conversion." "Shit!" the doctor exclaimed. "Why did you have to raise your voice, Jugsworth?" "Sorry," Jugsworth said. The Cybermen then started to walk towards a staircase leading onto the platform. "Run!" the doctor yelled. He, Jugsworth, and George ran in the opposite direction from the Cybermen. In another building, as the security guards and the Cybermen searched offices, Felicity bit her mouth closed and waited. She waited and waited, but there was no noise near her office's door. She breathed, a small sigh of relief coming out as she did. Suddenly, the door then burst down. Felicity screamed in shock and started firing at the Cyberman who had entered the office. The bullets bounced off the Cyberman. It was no use, and soon she ran out of bullets. There wouldn't be much time to reload before it got to her. "Intruder located. Delete," the Cyberman said. To be continued. Don't forget to click below to subscribe to the Nicholas Payne audio YouTube channel.